The sanctuary was adorned with flowers. Everyone had taken their seats. To the right of the altar stood the groom and his friends, while the bridesmaids were stationed on the left. Everything seemed to be in place, but not everyone was prepared. "Where is he, Mom? Why isn't Dad here to give away his only daughter?" Teresa asked, anxiety etched on her face. "I don't know, Teresa." "Hold on, I just received a text from him," her mother said. The hopeful look she wore while opening the message quickly faded into disappointment. "What does it say, Mom?" Teresa pressed. "He says, unavoidable delay. Go ahead with the wedding without me," she replied, reading aloud. "That's it? No explanation? No nothing?" Teresa exclaimed. "No, sweetheart," her mother said reluctantly. "But we have to proceed with the wedding. Nicholas and I have invested far too much money to call it off now." "But who's going to walk me down the aisle?" "It's absurd to go alone," Teresa insisted. Her mother hesitated for a moment before suggesting, "What about Gordon?" "But then again, you probably don't want everyone to know he's your biological father, do you?" Teresa's eyes narrowed. "And if you don't mind everyone finding out he's also been your lover since he got you pregnant. Now is really not the time for this argument." Her mother sighed, exasperated. "Fine. I'll ask your Uncle Frank. We're out of options." "Ugh, fine. Looks like we don't have much choice," Teresa muttered reluctantly. Nora entered the sanctuary and quickly whisked Uncle Frank to the dressing area. "Frank, you're going to have to walk Teresa down the aisle. Nick can't make it." "Me? Why me?" Frank stammered, visibly caught off guard. "Because we don't have time to argue. Now, hurry up. Go," Nora urged. With the arrangements made, Nora returned to her seat at the front of the church. Moments later, the guests rose to their feet as the bride, escorted by her Uncle Frank, walked down the center aisle. When the time came to ask who was giving Teresa away, Frank stumbled over his words before finally stammering, "Her mother, and my son-in-law." The ceremony continued, though a tension lingered as everyone quietly speculated about Nick's absence. Then, during the ring exchange, a man entered the sanctuary, clutching several large manila envelopes. A hush fell over the room as he approached Nora. "Nora Dexter, you are being served with a petition for divorce on grounds of adultery," he announced solemnly. "It alleges that you've been involved in a long-term affair." He handed her one of the envelopes before turning and addressing the congregation. "Gordon Black," the man declared, "you are being served with charges of alienation of affection, claims for 18 years of alimony, and a bill for the wedding expenses." Handing Gordon the remaining folders, the man departed. A murmur of disbelief rippled through the crowd, broken only when Gordon's wife delivered a sharp slap to his face before storming out. The mood of the wedding instantly soured, and guests began filing out, many making snide remarks as they went. When the sanctuary finally cleared, only Nora and Gordon remained. Gordon broke the silence. "Well, at least now we don't have to worry about Nick finding out." Nora shot him a withering look. "Do you think your wife is going to divorce you?" "Only if the sun rises tomorrow morning," he replied dryly. "I should probably avoid going home for now." "You can stay with me, then," Nora suggested. "Everyone knows about us anyway. Besides, I have some good bourbon we can drink." When they arrived at Nora and Nick's house, they were met by fire trucks. Gordon approached the crew chief, who informed him, this was definitely arson. Heavy accelerants were used, likely gasoline. Returning to Nora, Gordon said grimly, "Nick burned everything." "That's it. Let's find a hotel," Nora sighed. They checked into a discreet hotel, avoiding places where wedding guests might run into them. Nora's credit card was declined, so Gordon paid. She tried calling Nick about the card, but the number was disconnected. "Scorched earth," she muttered bitterly. "For good reason. Exhausted and disheartened, neither felt any motivation for intimacy. They passed out fully clothed after drinking. The next morning, they came down to breakfast in crumpled clothes. "Nora, do you have somewhere to stay?" Gordon asked. "I'll call Candace to see where I stand," she replied. "I might need a backup plan, though." As Nora called her daughter Teresa, she was greeted by an outpouring of heartbreak. "Mom, how could he? I thought Dad loved me. Now Johnny won't even speak to me. What am I going to do?" "I don't know, sweetie," Nora said softly. "But I need a place to stay. Can I crash with you?" Teresa hesitated. "I guess so, but if Johnny calls and wants to make up, you'll have to leave." "Deal," Nora said, relieved. "But can you pick me up? Nick burned me out." "What?" Teresa exclaimed in disbelief. "Dad burned down the house. He'd have to be downright evil to do that." "An understatement," Nora murmured grimly. "She will proceed to sue him for divorce and compensation for everything she's lost." Nick's attorney addressed the court. "My client did indeed burn down his house, but it's important to note that it was his house. The deed was solely in his name. As for his wife and daughter's belongings, they are safely stored in plastic bags within a storage unit. I am now handing the key to her attorney. Your Honor, we ask you to consider what would be a normal reaction for any man upon discovering that his wife had been unfaithful for over 20 years. Not only did she carry on an affair during their marriage, but this infidelity resulted in the birth of a child that both she and her daughter deliberately led him to believe was his own. While the divorce and related proceedings will determine a fair division of assets, we argue that there has been no significant loss on Mrs. Dexter's part. Therefore, we request the minimum penalty for Mr. Dexter." As Nick was leaving the courtroom, he turned to Nora and said, "See you in divorce court." Divorce hearing. When Nick arrived for the divorce hearing, he appeared strikingly different. He had been working out, shedding pounds and building muscle, giving him a more confident air. In contrast, Nora looked frazzled and worn down. Gordon had managed to broker a deal with his wife, agreeing to stay together under strict conditions. Candace would now control all their finances. Unbeknownst to Nora, Gordon had moved back home. Meanwhile, Nora struggled socially and financially, pinning her hopes on the divorce settlement to rebuild her life, possibly in a new city. Her attorney addressed the court. "Your Honor, Mrs. Dexter is requesting half of all financial assets as listed 6 months ago, along with half the proceeds from the sale of the land where their house once stood. She is also seeking $2,000 in monthly alimony for the next 5 years. Nick's attorney responded. "My client has endured years of betrayal. For more than 2 decades, he was deceived into believing that the child his wife bore was his. He was a devoted father and husband until, just days before the wedding, he discovered the truth by overhearing a conversation between his wife and daughter. We have obtained a recording of that conversation, which we believe is highly relevant. Your Honor, while the recording was made without the express consent of the parties involved, this is family court, where the evidentiary rules are more lenient. We request permission to play the tape." The judge allowed it, stating, "Proceed, but tread carefully." The tape. The courtroom fell silent as the tape played. "Teresa, Mom, you know what would be really cool for the wedding?" "Nora, honey, we're already over budget." "What is it now?" "Teresa, it won't cost anything. I was just thinking it would be amazing if both my dads could walk me down the aisle, Gordon and Nick." She giggles. "Nora, are you out of your expletive mind? I've spent 2 decades making sure Nick never found out the truth. Even that poor, clueless man might figure it out if you pulled something like that." "No, absolutely not. Teresa, come on, Mom. You took the risk of being with Gordon for over 20 years. Why not just leave Dad for him?" "Nora, because your father is the perfect husband and father. He's the man I come home to every day. Gordon, on the other hand, is the one who comes around to give me great sex. It's simple, Nick is who I love for marriage, and Gordon is who I love in bed. I've always wanted both. Honestly, I don't even know who I'd choose if I had to pick. Teresa, I wish I could tell my friends that Gordon's my real dad. They all think Nick is such a nerd. The tape stopped. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The judge ruled that Nora would receive an equal division of the couple's assets but reduced the alimony to $1,000 a month for just 3 years. Nick agreed to the terms. Having just secured $250,000 from Gordon to settle the 3 lawsuits against him, Nick used the money to purchase a condo near his job. A heartfelt conversation. Not long after the trial, Teresa called Nick. Teresa, Dad. Nick, Teresa. Gordon's not here, is he? Teresa, no, Dad. I wanted to say, you've always been my real father. Gordon was just Mom's mistake. Nick, how long have you known I wasn't your father? Teresa, I didn't find out until the trial, like everyone else. Mom never told me. Nick, did she also fail to mention the tape from the divorce hearing? Teresa, what tape? Nick, the one where you casually suggested having both Gordon and me walk you down the aisle. You know, the one where you admitted that you knew Gordon was your real dad. Teresa, oh, expletive. Dad, whatever I said, I didn't mean it. I was just joking with Mom. Gordon means nothing to me. Nick, you lied to me, Teresa. You've been lying for years. From now on, you're on your own. Teresa, Dad, wait. You promised you'd still pay for college. Nick, I'm sorry, but I'm done with promises to liars. A coffee shop reunion. A few weeks later, Nick was sitting at a coffee shop when Nora approached. Nora, do you mind if I sit with you? Nick, is this accidental or intentional? Nora, intentional. I wanted to talk after we've both had time to cool down. Nick, you think I've cooled down? Nora, I hope so. I wanted to take the opportunity to apologize. Truly, Nick, I'm sorry. The affair with Gordon, it was a mistake. It wasn't worth destroying our marriage. We got away with it for so long that I started taking you for granted. What I miss most about our marriage isn't the material things, it's the friendship. I miss talking with you, especially those cozy moments on the couch. You were my best friend as well as my husband. Losing that friendship has been harder than I thought. Nick, what, no requests for money? No pleas to forgive Teresa? What are you really after? Nora, sorry to disappoint, but no. It's just hard to completely let go after more than 20 years. I still care about you, Nick. I thought maybe we could at least try to be friends. Meet at Starbucks or somewhere neutral. Just talk. If it doesn't work, we can always stop. Nick, you know, I didn't expect this, but I think I'd like that too. Maybe the anger isn't as sharp as it was at first. Besides, you were always smart and had interesting ideas. I wouldn't mind hearing your perspective again. But let's be clear, when we meet, there's one topic that's off limits, our past sex life. Deal? Nora, smiling, deal. Tuesdays work for me. Nick, Tuesdays it is. Tuesday meetings. For several months, Nick and Nora met every Tuesday at a local coffee shop. Their conversations were light-hearted, focusing on shared memories and new interests. Slowly, they began to rebuild a sense of mutual respect. Eventually, they both felt comfortable enough to move their conversations to more private settings. Nick suggested meeting at Nora's house for coffee. When they were alone, Nora saw her chance to push things further. A bold suggestion. One evening, after hours of reminiscing, Nora leaned closer. Nora, Nick, do you enjoy these conversations as much as I do? Nick, I do. It's nice to reconnect without all the baggage. Nora, you know what else I've missed? Nick, what's that? Nora, the way we used to end our nights when we were married. After talking, we'd go upstairs, take off our clothes, and enjoy each other. Can we do that tonight? Please. Nick thought for a moment, then smiled. Nick, all right, Nora. Go upstairs and get the bed ready. I'll bring us some drinks and be up shortly. Nora, really? Oh, Nick. She rushed upstairs, excited and triumphant. Nora stripped off her clothes and lay on the bed, feeling confident that this was the beginning of her plan to win Nick back. She imagined a future where they'd rekindle their passion, move in together, and start over. A cruel twist. Minutes passed. Then more. Something wasn't right. Nora slipped on a robe and went downstairs to look for Nick. Nora, Nick? Are you there? The house was silent. On the kitchen table, she found a note. It read. Delay imminent. You don't have to wait for me, you can go, yourself. Nora stood frozen, the weight of his rejection sinking in. For the first time, she realized that Nick wasn't the same man she had manipulated and taken for granted all those years. Nick had finally moved on, and there was no going back. The end.